On today's episode of the Locked On Knicks podcast, two more interviews on the docket. James Borrego, Micah Nori, what could they potentially bring to New York? And the Knicks stay pat on night one of the NBA draft, what it means and what to look forward to on night two. All that next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? You are Locked On Knicks. I'm Gavin, Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster, and the Saturday co-host of the Locked On NBA podcast. He is Alex Wolf, editor-in-chief of the Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. You can find them on all forms of social media over at thestrict.land. Be sure to check out our buddy Prez's Disrespectful Player Comps. It is the single best article for my money, not only that the Strickland produces every year, but just on the internet every year. It'll make you laugh and it'll educate you all at the same time. But this is Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily podcast on the New York Knicks, giving you the most detailed insight on your favorite team at least 5 days a week. So be sure to join thousands of other Knicks fans and subscribing on both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform for the best insight on your favorite team. On today's show, Alex, we hit on James Borrego interviewing to be the Knicks head coach. We hit on the Knicks standing pat. Unfortunately, would have been really cool if they made a trade up just for content. I don't know what it means for the team. We're going to talk about it, but they stand pat on night one of the draft. And then Micah Nori, you talked about it a little bit. We'll go a little bit more in depth on him. Minnesota's assistant coach, also going to interview for the Knicks head coaching job. But we start today with James Borrego, the report coming from the Athletics, James Edwards, that he would be interviewing Alex, yet another assistant, the fourth name overall that we've heard, former head coach of the Charlotte Hornets. What was your initial reaction to hearing that Borrego would be interviewing for the job?
It's interesting with him, right? Because if you look at just like his record, it's not stellar. Although I will give him credit. I mean, he didn't make the playoffs with the Hornets, but last time that they had a winning record 3 years ago was with Borrego as coach. So he was able to make positive progress there. I remember at the time when he got hired there, it was pretty highly regarded. Like he was very in demand. A lot of teams wanted him, and he ultimately went with the Hornets. And I think it's gonna really ultimately come down to just kind of what Leon and company think of him. I think. I mean, he came there. He made a pretty immediate impact. I mean, they finished almost 500 his first year. Then, of course, the next year did not do nearly as well, but kind of bottomed out to get LaMelo Ball, and then steady improvement after that, and then another steady improvement the next year to a 43-39 record. So, just from the outside looking in, without doing a ton of research, I seem to remember him being regarded as like a pretty good offensive mind coming into his time there, and the results kind of bear out a little bit. Just in terms of the raw record, I'd have to go. We'd probably have to talk to our buddies at Locked On Hornets and various other Hornets people to kind of get a better idea of what he's like as a head coach. But I think it's a sensible guy to look at. It's a former head coach. I mean, it's possible that they're even looking at him as a possible like lead assistant for their own bench or something, and in which case that would be cool too. I would love more offensive minds with this team, so as many of those as they can get, whether it's Borrego, whether it's Micah Nori that we're going to talk about a little later in the show that they interviewed the other day as well. Like, I think they're doing the right thing by talking to a lot of people. I'd also be willing to bet that other than the four names that we've heard, which are Mike Brown, Taylor Jenkins, Micah Nori, and James Borrego in that order, I'd be willing to bet they've talked to other people too. Like, I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that there's a certain level of shadow dealings going on with this front office, and that there's probably been some interviews that nobody's heard about. There's probably been some trade discussions that nobody's heard about. There's probably been some draft discussions and draft workouts that nobody's heard about, because that's just how the Leon Rose front office operates. They tend to only let you hear what they want you to hear. And sometimes another team will let something out. But I find that most Knicks intel seems to come from, at least in my opinion, if you trace the breadcrumbs back, especially with this sort of stuff, back to someone else. It's not coming from the Knicks themselves. So either way, just for Borrego, I'm curious your thoughts, but I don't know. I guess I don't totally know how to feel about it other than to say I know he was a really sought after coach when he got hired by Charlotte. I know that he put together some, I think in retrospect, pretty decent results there considering just the crapshoot it's been since he left.
Mhm.
With largely some of the same personnel on that team.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I support it. I would need to hear the rationale behind why they hire him. And then obviously if they do ultimately hire him, his real test is going to be when the Knicks, go to training camp and then take the court in that first preseason game to see what kind of stuff he has in mind. But I would imagine based off his reputation that he had some pretty interesting stuff to say about what he might want to do with the offense and stuff.
Yeah. So funny thread here that I've noticed, and it seems like the Knicks have a type. Jay Triano, Mike Brown, Jason Kidd. What do they all have in common? Jay Triano was their lead assistant and an offensive coordinator. He was for Borrego in Charlotte, for Brown in Sacramento. And then I believe just this summer, I guess I shouldn't say was, I think he just got hired by Jason Kidd in the Dallas Mavericks. There was a report today from Scoop B. I put that in quotes because I don't know how reliable he's been in the past.
Not
but
reliable at all.
Yeah,
not even
so,
worth entertaining.
Probably not worth talking about. But that
actually, wait.
Okay.
You said the Jason Kidd thing? The Jason Kidd thing, real quick. I actually just saw a quote from Nico Harrison, which whatever, say whatever you want about Nico Harrison, but tonight was his night. He got to make the number one pick in the draft, and he had a quote where someone asked Cooper Flagg about, what do you think about these new Jason Kidd rumors or whatever? Have you heard from Kidd that he wants to be the head coach for sure? And apparently Nico Harrison later on said, I thought I put those rumors to bed. Jason Kidd will be our coach next year, period. Like, that's it. So I'd be willing to say Scoop B did not know what he was talking about.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, Jason Kidd's son apparently put the eyes emoji on the Instagram live, so I don't know, it might not be over yet.
Oh my god!
But that's the point of the offseason we're at. This is what happens, Knicks, when you don't make a first round pick. So Jay Triano is a common thread, and again, it makes it very difficult to divorce. All right, what is Borrego's offensive brilliance? What is Brown's offensive brilliance? Both those guys, I think, relative to the talent levels on the respective teams, had a good amount of success offensively versus what was Jay Triano. And maybe the Knicks could eventually get Jay Triano, someone I covered a decade ago when he was an assistant coach on the Suns. Fantastic guy, seems to know a thing or two about offense. But man, I like Borrego from that Spurs coaching tree. Started with the Spurs, was an assistant with them before coming back to the Hornets. I thought unfairly fired after a 43-win season in 21-22 that obviously Charlotte has not, to your point, hit that mark since. Creative guy, younger guy. That is the mold that I would go for. And I will, by and large, again, to your point, until we have the Hornets guys, avoid getting into further detail. But we'll simply note on James Borrego, like a young-ish, a little bit, I'm trying to think of the way to phrase this, a little bit more relatable option than Tom Thibodeau was, I think is probably the kindest way to put it. Not having a stick up his butt is another way to put it. I think just from a relating to players perspective, we can talk about with Micah Nori. He's an incredible personality. Borrego was very likable. If maybe the Hornets guys could tell me I'm dead wrong on this, my impression was he was very well liked by the players when he was in Charlotte. I think just from a personality perspective, I'm happy with it. And I'm happy that the Knicks are casting a wider net. And obviously Borrego is different than Nori in the sense that he has head coaching experience on the NBA level, but I'm happy they are not exclusively looking at guys, Alex, who were head coaches a year ago, because I think I talked about it with XJ, so I won't belabor the point. I think there's so much stupidity around the idea that the Knicks are making a mistake by having an extended process. I actually think the opposite, that it would be a grave mistake to have only interviewed two guys. So I'm happy that number's gotten to 4. Chris Persianen, to your point, I know has reported that there were a myriad of college names the Knicks were going through. And to your point, I wonder if there were like Zoom interviews with some of those guys that just didn't get reported. I am happy that much like when Tom Thibodeau was hired, even though he was the heavy favorite, there's pretty clearly the makings of a thorough process here.
Yeah, likewise. And, I just briefly went through some of the numbers, just surface level stuff with Borrego as well. And that last season, I mean, to your point, maybe an unjust firing when he got let go from Charlotte, because at least according to Basketball Reference, which I don't know if the numbers always 100% match with every other site there, but according to Basketball Reference, top 10 in offensive and defensive rating that year for Charlotte. So clearly things must have been lost around the margins that year. I'm not an expert on 21-22 Charlotte Hornets or what happened that season for them, but clearly a lot of close games or whatever that just didn't quite go their way because they had a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense, which is pretty impressive. Honestly, it was only a difference of like a point in the grand scheme of things. It was like 114 scored versus 113 allowed per 100 or something like that, but still a positive and two top 10 numbers both ways is impressive nonetheless. So definitely worth keeping an eye on him. And I'm with you. I mean, I've said all along, why would you not want them to have a thorough process for this? Why would you want them to take lightly the move that they've publicly proclaimed is their, I don't want to say their Hail Mary, but their one big shot to try to win a championship, so they think. And honestly, you can be sad about it and whatever and be empathetic to the players it happened to, but the reality is that the two teams that posed the Knicks their biggest threat this past postseason are both, I mean, the Celtics are fire sailing from what it looks like and preparing to just semi tear it down and start over again with Tatum and maybe Brown. Who knows? I've heard that Brown is potentially they're getting tons of calls on potentially trading him. And then Halliburton obviously tore his Achilles as well. You figure both those teams probably not going to be a big factor next year. So this is a very important, very, very important hire for the Knicks because they might have a window that opens up and maybe opens and shuts next year for all they know. But this next season seems like as golden of an opportunity as they're ever going to get to potentially at least make the finals and possibly win one. So love a thorough process, which we'll talk a little more about because I talked a little bit about Micah Nori, but we'll talk about him in a minute as well. But next, we're just going to talk a little bit about the draft. Night one of the draft was tonight, so we want to reflect on that. The Knicks did not move up, so we'll kind of look forward to day two and get in what we think the Knicks might want to do there. But we'll get into all that in just a moment when we get back in.
But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Wayfair. There's nothing like stepping into your own outdoor space and feeling like you've escaped to a personal oasis. If you are wanting to update your patio this season, Wayfair has made it so easy to turn that space into one that feels like yours, comfortable, stylish, and ready for the summer. Wayfair has everything you need to level up your outdoor space: conversation sets, outdoor bars, fire pits, hot tubs. That's what makes my eyes go crazy. Gazebos, and yes, even the perfect string lights to set the vibe. It's like giving your backyard that resort feel without that resort price tag. Alex, I know you talked a lot about how you were revolutionizing your outdoor set. The biggest thing for me was just like a really nice pair of deck chairs. And on Wayfair, I saw so many options. And my favorite part was that delivery was free, fast, and totally hassle-free, even with larger items. And now whether I'm hosting friends or just unwinding with a book outside, it genuinely feels like it's my own private retreat. So don't wait. Make your outdoor space your dream oasis today with Wayfair and enjoy it all summer long. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop a huge outdoor selection. It's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, what's up, guys? We are back here on Locked On Knicks. The New York Knicks, we already mentioned it, decide not to trade into round one of the NBA draft. Alex, I think you and I both would have been shocked, or maybe not shocked if they traded into one of the final 5 picks or so. I would have been surprised if they traded like anywhere 25 or under. Pretty much just obviously don't have a ton of assets to get that done. And to your point, already took 4 rookies last year, all of whom I think to some degree or another have a chance to crack the rotation. Jonathan Wasserman, our buddy, I believe still over at Bleacher Report. You can tell me if I'm off on that. Reported that the Knicks might be trying to trade early into round 2. Would be interesting if that happens tomorrow. But for now, no rookies on the New York Knicks after night 1 of the draft.
Yeah, it's interesting because I thought maybe there was an outside shot that they'd potentially want to move into the first round, like the late part of it or whatever, if there was someone that really caught their eye. But I mean, as we saw during this first round of the draft, apparently the cost of moving up is either really high or there's some really weirdly desperate and thirsty GMs out there that are just going crazy to move up like a handful of spots. It was like the Pelicans paid a a unprotected pick that was the going to be the better of theirs or Milwaukee's pick next year, in exchange to move up like I think it was like 5 spots or something at one point in this draft. Just absolute insanity. I mean, I don't know what went into that decision, even though it was for a guy that I at the 11th hour decided was probably one of my favorite players in the draft, and Derek Queen, but just crazy. So I mean, I'm maybe a little thankful that the Knicks didn't ultimately try to move up in this into the first round, because I guess there was a hell of a premium put on moving around in the first round this year based off a few of the trades that went down, where teams were trading back like 7, 8, 9 picks, whatever, and getting very well compensated just for the ability to fall back like 7 or 8 picks. So from that perspective, with the Knicks only with pick 50 at their disposal, and then the Washington pick next year, which maybe turns into a first now, I'm getting a little more convinced the Knicks might have a mid first on their hands. Is if Washington hold on to all those vets, I feel like they're gonna probably be in the conversation for the play-in. And they'll probably want that, because you can't have all these young players just wasting their rookie contracts and not developing and not being part of something for that long. So hopefully they go ahead and gift the Knicks a pick on a silver platter. But so they've got that at their disposal, but that's kind of like one of their only potential first round picks that isn't like swappable or gone for a little while now, thanks to the Bridges trade. And then they actually have like a pretty good mitt full of second round picks over the next 3 years. They have like, I mean, some of them are like not all that favorable, but they have something like 7 second round picks over the next 3 drafts, and that could turn into like 9 if the Washington pick doesn't convey next year, because that transfers into 2 second round picks if it falls inside the top 10 next year. So they do have some ammo in that regard to move around, but I kind of always expected that would end up being ammo that they look to use more on the second day of the draft rather than the first day of the draft. Although I did once again just miss the days of, why can't we just have a 1-day NBA draft anymore? It was so much easier, and there's no reason. It's not the NFL draft. It doesn't need to be 2 days, but that's just me being a curmudgeon. We could have been having this discussion about what the Knicks did in the second round today, but whatever. But either way, all that is to say, I'm not surprised that they didn't ultimately move into the first round. And I'm not even disappointed, really, because I still feel like they probably have a nice little laundry list of guys they like in the second round, and they probably enjoy that second round contract freedom that they can get to negotiate the deal to fit whatever parameters they need to make cap stuff work during this offseason, and hopefully pay that person handsomely like they did Kolek last year, but have the option to possibly draft someone they want to be a two-way player, possibly draft someone that they want to pay less than that rookie maximum in the second round. Like there's all kinds of options here.
Yeah, agreed with you. For people who are real sickos and want to look at what happened with the picks that would have been the Knicks, the Nets have had a draft that, at least from what I've seen, has been pretty universally panned. For those of you into Schadenfreude, for the rampant Mikal Bridges Twitter critiques from Nets accounts, have at it. Tonight is your night. The Nets at 19 took Nolan Traore, who's an interesting guard. He arguably was their best pick of the night. The guy the Knicks maybe on paper would have targeted there is excuse my pronunciation here, Kasparas Jakuchunis is what I'm getting from Brian at Brian JMBA. He put out a pronunciation guide. He was the guy who dropped. Of course, he falls to the Heat. Seems like that happens every single year. He was on paper probably the highest guy on the board. Walter Clayton Jr., Alex, who's someone who I would have been really, really excited about. He went 1 pick earlier to the Wizards. Other names of interest that the Knicks could have gotten that I'm a fan of, pretty much based on what I've read, very little firsthand scouting. Will Riley, Nick Clifford, shows you how well I know these guys, and Jace Richardson, I thought was one of the picks of the night by the Orlando Magic, just 6 feet tall, but has a 6'6" wingspan. Hyper intelligent player, was one of the analytics darlings of this year's draft. I think that is another really, really good move from Orlando that could have an impact as soon as next year. But overall, there have been like the seasons in the past, I think 2021, right, where they traded the pick to Oklahoma City that became Ousmane Dieng, though they take Jalen Williams with the next pick. That was the time I felt like I had the most FOMO. I feel like every year, though, we come, like I've learned my lesson with this. We come out of the first round critiquing the Knicks, and it always almost always, maybe arguably Obi Toppin, but now in retrospect, that seems more on Tom Thibodeau than that seems on the Knicks front office, given that he was just a relatively key piece in the NBA Finals. Walt Perrin doesn't miss, and if he did not deem it worthy to trade up for these guys, I think it's ultimately fine. I don't think there was maybe just by odds there will be a future All-Star who went in this range. There isn't really an obvious name to me. So this is a rare year, especially one where the Knicks don't end up getting a first-round pick, where I come out of the draft like without too much agita.
Yeah, I feel similar. I mean, also I've publicized it plenty, but because of the Knicks deep playoff run and the fact that this coaching search has happened when it has and whatever, I got to do way less draft prep than any year prior to this, and so there's much less room to fall in love with prospects when you're not even really looking at draft stuff for the most part, because you know that your team only has pick 50 on the books at that particular moment. So yeah, it's I mean, I don't find myself pining over anyone they missed out on realistically. I will say that Tiero, I think, is a guy that I'm looking at, and apparently is a guy that they have circled where I'm like, yeah, that's a lengthy dude with a good wingspan, seems to have really good defensive instincts, kind of a stock machine, really good like weak side shot blocker. Who has a little bit to work on from a scoring perspective, but I don't know, let him be the Padawan to OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges and see how that goes. And Mitchell Robinson, no less, too, like who's just, a supernatural shot blocker, and see where he goes. I mean, sure, that sounds great. So, like, I get the feeling that maybe it's him, maybe it's someone else. They probably have their eye on someone in that like 36 to 38 range, which seems to kind of be one of their sweet spots anyway. Like that's like where, I mean, we still haven't seen him, but like they took Rokas there. They took Deuce there with one pick later than Rokas, or 2 picks later than Rokas. I forget exactly how that worked out.
Kolek was 34 last year, I
Yep.
think.
Kolek was in that like early to mid 30s range. So that seems to be a range that they really like, and where they like to kind of, take their stab right there, just outside of the first round, like find that guy that they had circled and say, let's not let this guy get into the 40s or whatever. But I mean, also if they hold tight at pick 50, I had to point this out to a YouTube commenter the other day. This is the same team that rostered, only 2 of them that they drafted, 1 that they picked up in free agency. They rostered 3 players just this past season that were taken at pick 50 or later last draft, which was Huck Porty, Kevin McCullough Jr., and Anton Watson. So they had all 3 of those guys on their roster as well. So I kind of trust them no matter where they end up. I think they have a great eye for second round talent. To your point, Walt Perrin's the guy. I mean, he's arguably one of the most valuable people in this organization, without a doubt. So, a guy that we'll look back on eventually 15 years from now and be like, that was one of the best hires of the Leon Rose era, was Walt Perrin. Because that guy just, I mean, he maximizes that value in the second round all the time and just finds maybe not starters, but guys that will have NBA careers. I mean, even Jericho Sims, for all of his flaws that they took with like the 55th pick in 21, is now apparently going to get re-signed by the Bucks. And like almost every player the Knicks take in the second round has had like a 4 or 5 year career already and like are still in the league, which is more than you could say for a lot of teams. So anyway, I think we can circle back to the coaching search. We'll talk about Micah Nori a little bit in just a moment, and maybe just where the coaching search goes from here. Gavin, I actually speculated a little bit in my show this morning that I thought that maybe the Knicks should try to wrap this up by the end of the weekend if they can, just in the interest of having a coach in place before free agency starts. So I'm kind of curious your thoughts on that. So we'll get into that and a bunch more in just a moment on Locked On Knicks. But first, we want to let you know about our friends over at Skims. And when I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about the quality from friends and family, so I had to give it a try. And let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I always had issues with underwear, whether it was fit or comfort or just finding the right style for me. But Skims changed all that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. And I'll tell you guys, I've mentioned it before. I tried something new. I'll be full disclosure, like Skims did offer to send us a couple pairs of underwear, to which I was like, if it's free, it's for me. But I didn't quite know what to expect, and so I got one of their 3-inch stretch boxer briefs. So it's 3-inch inseam, whereas I'm usually a 5-inch inseam guy. And my biggest issue with 5-inch inseam is that, even though they're longer, sometimes they don't cling to your leg well enough. And then halfway through the day, you just feel like you're like having to adjust your underwear all day because they're like bunching up and it sucks. And just makes, especially if you're like playing basketball or something, makes it completely unenjoyable. Whereas the 3-inch boxer brief I got from the stretch one, specifically from Skims, it's been phenomenal. I play basketball in them. I do whatever I want in them. They never ride up, which I thought would be a worry because it was a little shorter, but actually that helps. And they cling to your leg real nice. And they're made out of the fabric that dries really quickly and just feels really great. So I love them. I wear them all the time. And honestly, I picked up some more pairs because the free pair was so awesome. So you could check them out for yourself too. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com and let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. All right, Gavin, we're back in to keep talking through some coaching search news. We've come back around full circle on the coaching search because there wasn't too much to talk about in terms of the draft for night one. Hopefully, night two tomorrow we have a nice robust show. Talk about 15 more Brock Aller moves that netted the Knicks a couple more second-round picks and eventually moved them up 14 spots or whatever. But for now, we have the news that again I briefly talked about on yesterday's show about Micah Nori, who interviewed with the Knicks. Timberwolves assistant Shams had the news first on this. It was confirmed by a bunch of people on the Knicks beat that he interviewed with the Knicks. He was, I mean, it seems like low key is a pretty desirable assistant in the league right now. A guy who obviously has been working under Chris Finch with Minnesota, who the Knicks tried to interview, were rebuffed on. No surprise. I mean, he's had a phenomenal run so far with Minnesota, so I don't blame them at all for wanting to hold on to him. But I personally, I thought it was, before we get into like how we think this coaching search should go from here, I thought it was really smart. Go at least interview this guy, pick his brain a little bit about what works so well with Cat and whatever. No matter what, you get at least a little bit of valuable intel out of, by asking him like, hey, what would you do if you were a coach here? But no matter what, he seems like a pretty up and comer and definitely seems like a character, which would make the post game interviews really fun. But yeah, I all in all liked the interview, and I thought it was once again just a pretty sensible. Once I looked into it a little, I didn't know the name off the dome, but once I looked into him, it seemed like a pretty sensible guy to go take a look at to me.
Yeah, it's another time where I will point people towards someone. Hopefully, we'll get on the podcast soon. Our buddy Shaq's NBA, who wrote a really good article talking about how the difference in Karl-Anthony Towns' usage between the Knicks and the Timberwolves, and the single biggest one was that they ran a lot of offense designed to get him 3-pointers, and lo and behold, of course, that was possibly our number one complaint on the offensive end under Tom Thibodeau. I think to just like various extents, not maximizing Karl-Anthony Towns, not recognizing him for what he is, which again is a point that Shax brings up in the article, which is an off-ball star, not really an on-ball star, not Julius Randle, who you give the ball to and you say, all right, clear out, like let him bully through 2 guys and like pivot and then whip a pass to the opposite corner for 3. Like Cat's not going to do that. What you can do with Cat that you can't really do with Julius Randle is like spam pick and pop. You can run him in off ball actions. You can run double big screens, which Minnesota, I mean, that's something you do with Randle too, but that's neither here nor there. Something Minnesota did a lot and the Knicks didn't really do. The fact that Cat's 3-point rate went down when he was playing center instead of power forward, when it should go up dramatically in that context, because again, in the non-Josh Hart world, he's being guarded by opposing centers who should be slow-footed, and you should be able to pick and pop them to death. That's inexcusable under Tibbs. Maybe part of the reason a team with the largest analytics staff in the NBA, at least as a couple of years ago, helped decide that Tom Thibodeau should no longer be the head coach. Alex, I would imagine that would not be an issue under Micah Nori, and that is something that he would really drive home. Shax in the article, which again I will link in the description of this episode, emphasizes that the organized offense for Cat in terms of the post was not very different, and at times Tom Thibodeau in the second half of the year did run some actions like setting like a little like cross screen on one side of the block, letting Cat loop around to the other, like really simple stuff that was very effective for him. His Cat is generally a really high level post up guy, especially against single coverage, especially against a mismatch. So all stuff to watch potentially if Micah Nori's hired, but I would imagine a lot of the same reasons you were excited about Chris Finch, you would also be excited about Micah Nori.
Yeah, absolutely. So now to close the show, I'll throw the question at you. So I was thinking about it and I was like, I've been trying to figure out like what the Knicks internal timeline is for this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious I didn't think the draft really mattered. I think, ultimately what happens with the draft in terms of getting a new coach, I should say. I think the draft matters obviously greatly in the grand scheme of team building,
Yeah.
but in terms of like, oh, we got to have a new coach installed. Hopefully you're not getting a coach again that you have to tailor all your decisions around. So even though, in past drafts, we've been like, oh, how's this guy going to fit with Tibbs? It's like, no, now hopefully the Knicks will get a coach that you go, oh, I'm really curious how this coach will utilize these unique skills that have been presented to him. So hopefully that's not a thing anymore. Also, it's not like draft picks can choose where they want to go, as Ace Bailey learned tonight with not
Big
wanting
time.
to go to Utah and stonewalling them and still getting taken by them, which is hilarious. But so, it's I think less consequential to have a coach in place by the draft when you're looking for a coach. That said, we're a handful of days, I think, what is it, Monday at 6 p.m. that the new league year starts. And so we're only a handful of days away from the start of the new league year, which of course brings with it free agency and potential trades. I don't necessarily think the Knicks are going to be going insane in free agency. And obviously they don't really have cap space or anything, like going to be moves around the margins. I do think they get access to a taxpayer mid-level this year. So that's kind of a big deal to be able to sign some help, whoever they end up going with there. But I do think from that perspective, once you're dealing with players that have their choice about where they go, maybe it could be beneficial to have the coach in place. I certainly don't want them to rush it, but I mean, do you think that that maybe we see the end of this by the weekend? Like I don't know. There is a part of me that's thinking enough names have hit the public now that I feel like they've probably interviewed at least double that many that we just don't know of, and that we might see something by like this weekend, just so that there's someone in place by Monday.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on whether it will happen or not. I think totally plausible. I think that's probably a good guess by you. I would personally argue that if it affects your ability to interview candidates and think about it to a degree where everyone or as many people as possible in the front office are comfortable with the hire, I would not rush a hire specifically for free agency, because to your point, there was a clear-cut issue, and this is again something, if you want to go back and listen to it, we talked about a lot in that episode with XJ. There was a clear issue in terms of organizational alignment with Tom Thibodeau, right? Of coach and front office not being on the same page. Ideally, with a new head coach, you would remedy that. And if you remedy that, then I think it's okay for the front office to pick the ingredients and the coach to it'll be like a little bit like Chopped. Like he gets the ingredients and then he gets to cook them up. And presumably, just because the Knicks don't have an immense amount of cap space, like whoever they'd be signing will be best case scenario 7th or 8th guy. I think the most compelling argument is from a recruiting standpoint. Like, not that Nickeil Alexander-Walker I don't think is economically feasible for the Knicks, but let's just say they did hire Micah Nori and Nickeil Alexander-Walker said, man, I'd love to come to New York. And the Knicks were like, all right, maybe we make a trade to get off Josh Hart, so we have room to bring you in, or something along those lines. That is really the most compelling argument of that for me. But I think at the end of the day, like however long you need to make the best hire, however many people you need to interview to feel like you were thorough in your process and you left no stone unturned, I think that would be my greater priority. But on that note, we'll end this edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. We'll be back tomorrow for a very thorough part 2 on whoever the Knicks draft. And hopefully maybe at some point over the weekend, we'll get on some kind of draft expert to talk about whoever they took. But until then, he's Alex and Gavin. We'll talk to you soon on Locked On Knicks.